What if the most powerful instrument in American music wasn't a guitar, a drum machine, or a synthesizer, but one woman's voice? Before stadium pop, before diva culture, before the crossover blueprint everyone chases today, there was Aretha Franklin. She didn't just make hits. She rewired how a singer leads a band, how a song argues its case, how a community hears itself. But behind the legend is a story of risk and reinvention. A child prodigy from a Detroit pulpit who almost disappeared into the standards aisle, until one explosive session lit the fuse. Stay with me, because once you hear how respect was rebuilt from the floorboards up, you'll never hear pop, soul, or even modern R&B the same way again. We're going to pull the record apart, note by note, to see how she changed the rules. Here's the myth. Aretha was just a once-in-a-lifetime voice. Here are the receipts. She was a pianist, an arranger, a bandleader. She shaped pockets, called vamps, wrote the blueprint for backing vocals, and turned studio time into testimony. Think about it. Every time you hear a pop chorus that spells the theme, a bridge that breaks like a wave, or a singer who testifies instead of just performing, you're hearing Aretha's architecture. And yet, the cost was real. Pressure, expectations, and a fight to control her sound in rooms that didn't expect a woman, let alone a black woman, to run the show. So how exactly did she flip a song written by a man into the global language of power? And why did the world answer? Zoom out. Gospel didn't cross over to pop on its own. She carried it. And when she carried it, it carried us. From the pulpit to Muscle Shoals, from a mic stand to a movement, from a studio take to a living, breathing call and response with millions, Aretha made records that speak back. This isn't nostalgia. It's infrastructure. The melisma you hear on singing competitions, the sermon-to-hook storytelling in modern R&B, the superstar as moral voice at national moments, these are lines that trace back to her. But there's a chapter almost nobody tells. The night a church album became her biggest statement, and the long road to being crowned, officially and unofficially, the standard every vocalist studies. If we can find the moment the voice became the architect, we'll understand how she changed music itself. So where does a voice like that come from? Not a label office, not a magazine cover. It starts in a room where the air vibrates with belief, where rhythm is conversation, and a teenager learns to move hearts with a piano and a breath. To see how she built the engine before she hit the highway, we have to go home, back to the church that forged her timing, her fire, and her fearlessness. Hard cut to Chapter 1. From Pew to Pro, the making of a voice. You can trace this voice to a street corner on Linwood, a cross on the wall, and a father whose sermons could shake plaster. At New Bethel Baptist Church, Reverend C.L. Franklin didn't just preach, he performed truth. Young Aretha watched the temperature of a room rise and fall with phrasing, timing, and breath. She learned that a pause can be louder than a shout. She learned that a single note held just long enough could open someone's chest like a door. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town, jukeboxes spun tidy love songs and radio men liked hits that behaved. The world outside the sanctuary wanted singers who stayed inside the lines. Inside New Bethel, there were no lines. There was call and response. The people were the metronome. The choir was the wind. And the organ was a weather report. Hold that sound in your head. Now, add the road. As a teenager, Aretha toured the gospel circuit with her father. Hot churches, cold buses, one-night stands where the crowd knew every Bible story and every kind of pain. Those rooms trained breath control better than any conservatory. Those rooms taught how to build a song like a sermon. Start soft, tell the truth, then testify until the walls answer. By the time any label noticed her, the parts were already dangerous. Piano hands that could drive a band, ears that arranged harmony on the fly, and a way of shaping vowels so meaning bent toward her. Here's the piece almost everyone misses. Aretha wasn't just born with it. She worked for it. At home, she'd sit at the piano and solve songs like puzzles. Where does the harmony turn? Where does the bass push? Where does the voice break and become something more? That's the architecture of a leader, not a passenger. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, in the industry, gatekeepers wanted polish over power. So when Columbia signed Aretha at 18, they did what polite labels did. They put a diamond in a glass box. Standards, show tunes, cabaret settings. She cut lovely records. You can hear the instrument blooming. Clear head voice, velvet low notes, a touch of blues around the edges. But the rooms were wrong. Too much carpet. Not enough wood. Too much silverware. Not enough sweat. Hold that sound in your head. Now add the world outside. Civil rights marches on the 6 o'clock news. Birmingham on fire. Detroit factories humming by day and a different kind of heat at night. Audiences were changing. They didn't want nice. They wanted necessary. They wanted records that argued their case and won. Here's the piece almost everyone misses. Even in those early Columbia sessions, Aretha is already arranging. Listen close, and you hear her steer background vocals, nudge tempos, choose the moment to open the throttle. She's not just a voice on a chart. She's the one putting the lights where the drama will happen. But the frame is too narrow. The river is wide, the bottle is small. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, down in Alabama, a room in Muscle Shoals was catching lightning. Fame Studios had a rhythm section that cared more about feel than fashion. Jerry Wexler at Atlantic knew it. He also knew Aretha wasn't a songbird for hire. She was a band leader. If the room let her lead, the record would catch fire. Hold that thought and go back to church for a second. Remember the rules Aretha learned. Let the people set the pulse. Answer what the room needs. Build the vamp like a staircase, step onto the last stair, and don't look down. Those rules don't change in a studio. They just get microphones. Here's the pivot. Winter 1967. Aretha heads to fame. She sits at the piano, not the pedestal. The groove starts close to the ground. The pocket is human, not mechanical. When she lands, I never loved a man the way I love you, you hear the sanctuary and the street share a heartbeat. It's not just singing, it's strategy. She sets the tempo with her hands, places the background answers like an amen corner, and times the peak like a preacher who knows exactly when the room is ready. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, in pop, the air is still full of tidy melodies. But this is a different weather system rolling in. It smells like wood, Hammond oil, and after-service laughter. It has the hush of a prayer and the bite of a headline. A voice, now fully in charge of its tools, is about to teach radio how to listen. Hold that sound in your head. Now add the last ingredient. Family. With sisters Irma and Carolyn, Aretha locks the backing lines into a living conversation. No wallpaper harmonies, but voices with purpose. They don't decorate the lead. They argue for it, the way a good choir argues for truth. The record becomes a room, and the room becomes a world. Here's the piece almost everyone misses. Aretha's genius isn't only volume or range, it's governance. She governs dynamics, governs space, governs time. She decides where the spotlight falls and how long it stays. She's not a passenger on a producer's vision. She's the architect handing out blueprints. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, on the street, the stakes are growing. Protest signs, rising expectations, and a new demand for dignity. At work, at home, on the airwaves. A singer who can carry gospel's moral gravity into pop's mass audience isn't just talented. She's necessary. So when the world finally hears that first Atlantic blast, it isn't a debut. It's a reveal. Years of pews, pianos, and pressure snap into focus. The era is ready. The engine is built. All it needs now is a song that can carry a whole conversation in 2.5 minutes. If she could turn a studio into a sanctuary, what would happen when she took a man's words, flipped the mirror, and made the whole world spell out her demand? In early 1967, one small decision tilts the room. Jerry Wexler moves Aretha from the glass box world into a band-first situation, and the Muscle Shoals rhythm section meets a leader who doesn't wait for permission. The collision isn't fireworks, it's alignment. Piano meets pocket. A sermon meets a backbeat. After that first pass on I Never Loved a Man the Way I Love You, the air changes. The band hears it. The label hears it. Aretha hears herself fully in charge of the weather. Freeze the frame. Listen to the pocket one more time. Hear how her left hand sets the tempo, how the drums tuck in close, how the background voices answer like an amen corner. It isn't an overdubbed idea. It's a room becoming a record. But the real detonation is waiting. In New York, the same core players regroup around a song written by Otis Redding. Good. Already respected, already a hit on stage. Aretha doesn't cover it. She rewrites its meaning in real time. She flips pronouns, takes the point of view, and adds a chant that feels like both playground and parliament. R-E-S-P-E-C-T. Then she threads "Sock It to Me," like a drumline you can sing. The floor of the studio turns into a street corner and a sanctuary at once. Numbers don't tell it. This clip does. Picture the first radio spins. DJs talk less and grin more. Callers jam the lines. Local stations start their hour with that snare pickup because it wakes the city. People don't just like it. They use it. Women hear agency. Black audiences hear a public claim said plainly. Musicians hear a master class in arrangement, where the singer is also the architect. After release in April 1967, the single doesn't climb. It leaps. Pop number 1? R&B number 1. It's not just chart action, it's cultural weather. Kids hear the future, some papers hear a problem. Too raw, too church, too political for the comfort of a format that liked its soul polite and its messages hidden in metaphors. Reviewers split. The street isn't split at all. And then the backlash landed. Gatekeepers try to shrink the moment. Great voice, sure, but it's just a cover. That's the tell. They're listening to the title, not the record. Because the authorship here isn't ink on paper, it's the arrangement. Where the beats fall, who gets to spell the theme, how the vamp opens the windows. These are decisions an author makes. Aretha authored the record. Freeze the frame again at the bridge. Hear the stop time breaks. The hand claps that sound like a crowd forming its own rhythm section. The way her piano stabs steer the horn replies so they don't just decorate, they testify. This is choreography of parts, of power, of perspective. The band is tight because the leader is clear. The first big stages make it undeniable. Television spots, theater residencies, and then the headlines, Queen of Soul, starts as a crown in print, but quickly becomes a job description. On stage, the song doesn't end when the band cuts out. It ends when the audience is done answering. That's a new contract for mainstream pop. Call and response isn't a novelty. It's the engine. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town, other artists take notes. Some try to church up their singles. Others borrow the spelling trick. But copying the surface misses the point. What lands isn't the spelling. It's the stance. The voice that sets terms and invites the room to co-sign. Press cycles move the way they always do. Late and literal. Trend pieces talk about message music. The records don't notice. The summer of '67 keeps spinning, and Respect becomes the walk-on music for people who need courage in public. It is a fist made of harmony. Hold that sound in your head. Now add impact. The wins pile up. The single becomes shorthand in films, in protest clips, at parties. It doesn't age. It updates. Fans don't argue about genre. They cite outcomes. Doors opened, heads lifted, the way a crowd stands taller by the second chorus. Critics who once said "too church" quietly file it under classic and pretend they always knew. Here's the piece almost everyone misses. The rise wasn't luck or a marketing plan. It was craft, governance of time, space, and dynamic, applied to a social moment that needed a simple word it could sing back. Aretha made the blueprint portable. Any room, any band, any broadcast, she could set the rules in 2 bars. By the end of that year, detonation turns into orbit. She's no longer breaking in. She's breaking open what pop can hold. Testimony, demand, instruction, release. The kids hear permission. The suits hear risk. The culture hears a leader. If one song could flip the balance of power, what happens when the same mind starts building whole records like arguments, arranging the band, placing the voices, and turning the studio into a courtroom? She always wins. Aretha's image wasn't built on shock haircuts or tabloid stunts. It was power worn like a crown, pressed straight or natural hair depending on the season, church queen gowns next to streetwise coats, a stare that said, "We're doing this my way." Kids copied the stance, the upright posture at the piano, the small smile before the big note, the quiet that made you lean in. Parents feared the heat underneath. This wasn't background music. It asked things of you: dignity, attention, response. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town, radio still wanted nice soul. Aretha's records didn't shout. They testified. That made some gatekeepers nervous. Too church, too political, too much woman at the center. And yet, the more they tried to box her in, the more the culture took its cues from her. Slang, attitude. Even the way people clapped on the 2 and 4 found a new snap after she hit. Solo the drums. Hear what they're doing under the vocal. It's a light, dancing pocket. Tight kick, dry snare, hi-hat with a human wobble. That little lean lets her phrases glide across the bar line. You feel movement, even in a slow song. That's why the records still hit dance floors. Let's open the hood. Aretha is not just the singer. She is the arranger at the piano. Listen to Chain of Fools. The guitar lick is a hook, yes, but she's the one framing the entrances and exits. When the choir should answer, where the drums should thin out so the vocal lands like a verdict, how the horns comment without stepping on the story. She builds a case, verse by verse, and then throws the doors open on the vamp so the audience can step inside. One studio trick you can't unhear after this. On Think, the backing vocals aren't wallpaper. They're a courtroom chorus. Freedom is placed after the downbeat, like a shout from the gallery. Once you hear that delay, you can't unhear the power move. The singer sets the law, the choir makes it public. The myth engine kept spinning. Diva stories, rumors about temper and control. Here's the piece almost everyone misses. To lead a band at that level, with that precision, you need control. She counted off tempos. She shaped vowel lengths to pull the bass forward or push it back. She told horns when to stab and when to sigh. That isn't drama. That's direction. Solo the bass. Feel the logic. In You Make Me Feel Like. A natural woman, the bass doesn't just follow the chords, it argues with them. It rises early into the next change, giving her voice a soft ramp. That's why the chorus blooms without volume tricks. It's the floor lifting under her. Fashion and culture followed in quieter ways. Church formal met street real. Gloves with grit, fur with fire, Sunday best on a Friday night stage. Zine covers and newspaper columns wrestled with the symbols, how can gospel sit next to love songs? Is Respect a pop hit or a protest? The audience had their answer. Both. The radio format had to adjust. And that's why copycats never quite felt right. Imitators tried the spelling trick, the choir shouts, the call and response breaks. They got the surface. They missed the spine. Aretha's records work because the parts are integrated. Piano, not decoration. Conductor. Her left hand is the traffic cop. Her right hand draws the map. Drums. Dry, human. With micro-push on fills that aim her toward the peak. Bass, connective tissue, anticipations and dropouts that make room for breath. Horns, punctuation, not paragraphs, short, shaped replies to her sentences. Choir, often with Irma and Carolyn, sometimes the sweet inspirations, not oohs, their policy statements. Engineering, close mics on the vocal, rhythm section mostly live in the room, leakage allowed because vibe beats isolation. Now listen to the rhetoric of her singing, how she speaks melody. She starts conversational, almost casual, like she's telling you a story across a table. Then she widens the vowels and stacks melisma like stairs. Each run isn't a show-off move. It's a hinge that swings the door to the next emotion. By the time she hits the vamp, she's not performing, she's governing, deciding when we're released. Freeze the frame, hear the choir stack on the chorus one more time. It's not just high, middle, low. It's timbre. The top voice is bright but narrow, leaving holes for the lead to pierce. The middle is warmer, blending into the organ. The low part sits with the bass so the harmony feels grounded, not sugary. That's architecture you feel, even if you don't know the terms. Controversy? Sure. Some stations balked at the weight of the message. Some critics called the records too churchy, as if that were a flaw. In homes and clubs, people heard permission to be proud, to be loud, to set terms. That's why the clothes, the stage walk, the half-smile mattered. They were signals. You can stand like this too. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town, producers start chasing the Aretha sound. Dry rooms, live takes, hand claps thick in the mid-range. But the copycats miss the last ingredient, governance of time. Aretha plays with micro-delays at the end of lines, landing just behind the snare so the lyric feels considered, almost judicial. That's the real blueprint. How to place truth so it can't be ignored. Here's the takeaway you can test on any track from this run. Her records move in 3 steps: testimony, vamp, release. Testimony lays the facts. Vamp gathers the room. Release lets everyone breathe taller. That's why the songs outlive their season. They don't depend on slang or trend. They depend on a structure that makes courage feel inevitable. So yes, the myth made her iconic. The gowns, the headlines, the whispers. But the reason the music still cuts through phone speakers and stadium PAs is simple: craft. The rooms were tuned to her. The bands aligned to her hands, the mixes built for her arcs. That is why the crown stuck. If the studio let her lead like that, what happens when she brings all that power back to the source? No spotlight tricks, just a choir, a mic, and the heat of a living church? The grind math never makes headlines. It's miles, thousands of them. Weeks of buses because flying triggers panic. Hotel rooms that all smell the same. Sound check at 4, press at 6, show at 9, shake hands at 11, bus at 1. Label memos push for another single, another TV spot, another city that needs her. Somewhere in there, you're supposed to be a daughter, a sister, a mother, a wife, and still write, arrange, and sing like the first time. That's not a schedule. It's a centrifuge. Listen to how the tempo feels heavier now. In the late 60s, the wins pile up, but so do the weights. Business pressure turns songs into deliverables. Family and marriage strain the edges. The culture wants her to be a symbol of excellence, of the movement, of how it's done. Symbols don't sleep. The voice that can light a room now has to hold up a world. Nights blur. Decisions get made fast. Some are smart. Some are simply survival. This is the part fans don't put on t-shirts. There are cancelled dates. There is fatigue that doesn't yield to coffee or applause. There are headlines that guess at what they don't know, and whispers that travel faster than any tour bus. When you live at the center of a band, a label, a household, and a cause, every tug takes something. The chemistry changes. Friends are hurt. Trust thins. Songs have to carry not just feelings, but pressure. We're going to sit with this for a second. 1968 comes with funerals. She sings as an act of mourning, as an act of steadiness, and the world hears strength. Strength is real. It is also costly. The expectation becomes the floor. Be great. Be ready. Be brave. Be the example. The bill arrives in private. Loneliness, anxiety, the daily arithmetic of how to keep going without breaking. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town. The industry sharpens its knives. If you smoke out a radio format and change how singers lead bands, the copycats flood in. A&R wants another respect, but new. Critics who once called the records too churchy now treat her very church as a gimmick to be managed. The market moves on to fresh faces. The bar for Aretha is Aretha plus more. That equation never balances. And then the stalemate. A string of sessions where the fit isn't right. A run of records where the frame feels off. The songs land, but the room isn't tuned to her hands the way it used to be. The charts still show up, but not like before. You can feel fatigue in the arrangements, a little less air around the choir, a little less danger in the drum pocket. It's not failure, it's friction. Enough friction, and the engine runs hot. Listen to how the tempo feels heavier now. So she does the most dangerous thing an artist at the peak can do. She stops running toward the world and turns back to the source. If the studio has become a spreadsheet, then the sanctuary will be the recalibration. 2 nights. A church with real heat and real risk, where every breath is recorded, and the audience answers back. It isn't a retreat. It's a reckoning. Amazing grace is what happens when the cost meets the cure in public. There is no safety net in that room, no overproduction to hide behind, no myth machine to spin. Just a choir, an organ, a band that knows how to listen, and a voice that has carried more than we knew. You can hear exhaustion transfigured into endurance. Notes that might have been frayed on the road become ropes the audience climbs. She doesn't escape pressure. She converts it into praise. We're going to sit with this for a second. The live album explodes beyond category. Gospel to the bone, but purchased and cherished by people who've never set foot in a pew. It proves what she always knew. The church isn't a box she has to climb out of. It's an engine the world keeps trying to borrow. In a career arc, this is the turn. Out of the industry's tug of war, and back into a room where call and response resets the soul. And yet every turn costs something. Coming home to gospel doesn't fix the business. It doesn't quiet the headlines. It doesn't slow the culture's appetite. The touring math still hurts. The expectations still howl. There will be years when the singles don't move like they used to, when the critics talk about decline, when the market calls her yesterday because it can't see tomorrow. Most acts fade. Aretha doesn't fade. She repositions. She chooses survival over speed, craft over trend, authority over novelty. This is the part fans don't put on t-shirts. The end here isn't a crash. It's the end of an uninterrupted run. The first chapter of dominance closes. The crown stays, but the battlefield moves. And the woman who taught radio to spell a demand decides to teach time a new trick: longevity. If the sanctuary could turn cost into power, what happens when the state itself calls for a voice? When history needs a singer to stand in the center of the room and define what American sound means for the next generation? Let's map the lineage. Start with the obvious bloodlines. Cissy Houston to Whitney. The head-to-chest switch. The clean melisma that climbs like stairs. The pause before detonation. That's Aretha's classroom. Mariah takes the staircase higher and makes it sparkle. Beyoncé studies the governance. How to place a line behind the snare so the lyric feels inevitable. Mary J. Blige brings church-to-street honesty, turning confession into power, the way Aretha made testimony into law. Alicia Keys, Jasmine Sullivan, Jennifer Hudson. Different shades, same blueprint. A pianist leader who sets the pocket, a voice that directs the room, a chorus that invites the audience to co-sign. Spot the lineage. Hear Beyoncé hold the vowel on a chorus peak, then land behind the drum. Aretha's timing trick, modernized. Zoom out. Subgenres changed because she existed. R&B power ballads stop being syrup and start being architecture. Bass as ramp, choir as policy, vamp as civic space. Pop divadom turns from image first to craft first. The true badge is not the dress. It's the ability to govern a live band and keep a stadium breathing together. Gospel pop crossovers? She didn't invent the bridge. She made it sturdy enough to carry a culture both directions. The myth became state business. First woman inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. 18 Grammys. National Medal of Arts. Presidential Medal of Freedom. And the image that sits above politics. January 20th, 2009. A cold day in Washington. She steps up and sings, "My Country, 'Tis of Thee," and for 4 minutes, America sounds like a choir again. That's not nostalgia. That's function. When the nation needs a pitch reference for dignity, it uses her. One sample you've heard 1,000 times. Producers raid the cupboard and keep finding spices with her name on them. Hip-hop chops a line, a run, a choir stab. The sample isn't just flavor, it's authority by citation. When a rapper wants the hook to feel like a verdict, an Aretha slice does the job because listeners already trust that tone as law. Afterlife isn't only awards, it's reissues and second lives. Amazing Grace, once a beloved recording, later a restored film, pulls new generations into the room. Tribute nights sell out not because people want to cosplay the past, but because they want that feeling in public. The moment a crowd becomes a choir. Murals go up. Playlists bloom. A teenager in Lagos or Leeds finds a clip, copies a line, and suddenly the living room is a workshop in phrasing. Okay, your pick goes in the pinned playlist. Tell me the first Aretha moment that hit you in the chest. Was it the spelling lesson that turns a chorus into a march? The quiet verse in Natural Woman that cracks open the sky? The freedom calls in think that land a beat late like a shout from the gallery? Drop it. We'll build the community crate together. Why now? Why 2025? Because the modern ear is trained for maximalism. Loud everything, all at once. Aretha teaches restraint as power. She shows how to stack dynamics so the last minute of a song feels like a sunrise, not a siren. In an algorithm era, where skips punish the slow burn, her records remind you that patience pays off. Testimony, vamp, release. That sequence still wins rooms, still wins streams, still wins lives back from noise. Solo, the craft in your head. Left-hand piano sets the law. Bass anticipates, drums stay human. Choir answers like citizens. Now hear your favorite current hit. Does it click why it works? If you're new and you want a gateway, take 3 doors. Door 1. I never loved a man the way I love you. To hear the studio become a sanctuary. Door 2. Respect. To hear arrangement as authorship and a crowd adopt a chorus as a right. Door 3. Amazing Grace, album or film, to see how breath, choir, and risk fuse into something bigger than pop. The aftershock continues because the method continues. Singers study her vowel shapes. Producers study her mic distance and live in the room leakage. MDs study how she counts off. Critics still quote the records like case law. Every few years, a list tries to name the greatest. Rolling polls change. The crown doesn't. In rehearsal rooms and classrooms, the answer to how do I make it mean something is still let Aretha show you. And that's why copycats never quite felt right. People crib the run, the shout, the spelling. They miss the spine. A leader at the piano, shaping a band in real time, using silence as a blade and breath as a bridge. That's the part you can't fake. Before Aretha, pop soul's center of gravity sat with the producer. After her, the singer could own the room without asking. If you were there, you already knew. If you weren't, now you do. Your turn. What was the first Aretha moment that hit you in the chest? And who deserves our next deep dive? Whitney's Preacher to Pop arc? Beyoncé's live band governance? Or do we rewind to the source and unpack the gospel architects who set the table before all of them? This is Poppy Lore. Subscribe so this history doesn't get erased by the algorithm, and hit the next episode where we trace Aretha's blueprint into the Diva Playbook, from Whitney to Beyoncé, how the live band became the star. The journey doesn't end here, pop lovers. Watch this next.